With another episode of Broken Truth, this is John Davidson, and today I'm joined by the lovely and talented Dr. Sheila Furey, who is president of the Virginia Medical Freedom Alliance, as well as Christine Dolan, investigative journalist and good buddy of mine. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
John.
So today I think we're going to talk a little bit about Bobby Kennedy and his nomination, or RFK Jr., depending on how you know him, and his nomination to be Secretary of Health and Human Services. What do you guys think about this?
I think it's great. I think it's a necessity for America. It's a necessity for the health. And it's not just the physical well-being, it's the mental well-being, because nobody wants to go through what we went through in this country, like we did with COVID. Mm-hmm. And Bobby understands that.
I think it's long time in coming. The entire health industry needs to be held accountable, and that patients have been suffering for decades with no accountability. And with the work of Bobby, I think that we can begin the process of reforming the healthcare industry, and so that patients are first rather than pharmaceutical companies.
I totally agree with you both. We've covered so much of this the last 4 years. Each one of us has been in this fight in different ways. Christine and I have covered a lot of the injured from the vaccines. I've covered a lot of the hospital homicides. I think you have too, Christine. And Dr. Furey, your organization has also been fighting. Can you tell me a little bit about what you've been doing?
We formed in the midst of COVID to offer people alternative treatment that was used around the world to treat COVID. And we also have been working consistently on treating and assisting those who have been injured by the COVID-19 vaccines. And in the midst of that, we noticed that the problems within healthcare were so huge that it went from the childhood vaccine schedule to the end of life, and that people in every spectrum were suffering. And the medical establishment was focused on what the latest protocol was and what the latest drug they could give people, rather than addressing the underlying problems that were coming, that were the cause of their disease. And the physicians are literally indoctrinated to prescribe, not provide health. And so people are really seeking out across the spectrum. And it doesn't matter what side of the political axis you fall on. People want health for themselves and for their families, and they're not getting it in the traditional healthcare setting, and they're looking for options. And I think Bobby Kennedy offers those options by reforming the system that we have now.
One of the upsides from COVID, if there is an upside from this, is that it's opened up a conversation for wellness. It's opened up a conversation for alternatives. And I noticed, John and Sheila, about 2 years ago, when I was going out to Ohio to do an event on medical freedom, and there were people that were telling me that were in the alternative, the supplement business, for lack of a better word, how the FDA was targeting some of them at that point in time. So there is a pushback within our government where people want to have alternative measures, and whether it's cancer treatment and not going the traditional route, whether it's ivermectin, not wanting to take remdesivir. And the problem, I think, that has, I guess the issue that has arisen as a result of COVID is that people realize they don't have choices. So having somebody like Bobby as the captain of the ship at HHS, who does want to have choices for the American public, I think it's fortuitous, and it's going to be very telling when we get to the hearings, because for those senators, whether it's Susan Collins from Maine, where the state legislature has nuked religious exemptions in Maine, like they have in New York and California and in Connecticut, we will see the true nature of who these people are. And people have to understand that pharma is a business of K Street lobbying finances. And so every time that there's a pushback, every time that somebody says no, that they don't want to, vote for Bobby Kennedy because of this, that, and the other thing, people need to take a look at the finances that these senators have received in terms of campaign donations through the years.
I agree. The money coming in is it's overwhelming, and not only the money, but the fake grassroots campaigns that seem to spring out of nowhere. 17,000 doctors, we reported on Friday, Jillian Michaels and a few other places discovered that these 17,000 organic doctors, right? They're not really organic. Anyone can sign. You don't have to be a doctor. You can go to our brokentruth.tv story about it from Friday. This is a machine that's designed to look as if it's natural, but it's not. And the pharmaceutical companies have gotten so good at it that it's destroying our country. So someone like Bobby, that's the dream, right? I mean, it doesn't mean he's perfect, and doesn't mean he's not going to need a lot of support once he's in. But I agree with you. I think he's going to be the right kind of person that could help instigate the real change needed to pretty much save the country.
Well, he's not going to be bought. Bobby's not going to be bought. I mean, he's courageous. He's outspoken. He's smart. He probably knows more than anybody. And quite frankly, I can't wait to see the testimony, because if it's anything like when he got attacked and when he testified before Jim Jordan's committee, I guess it was 18 months ago, I think it's going to knock some of these people back. And I think it's going to be interesting. Sheila, you're going to Washington, right? To support Bobby?
I am going to Washington on Thursday. I'm excited to be there. And I think both of you are absolutely right that the medical industrial complex has really been purchased by the pharmaceutical companies. And the pharmaceutical companies truly are indoctrinating doctors, that their studies are the ones that win. Their studies, the journals are all controlled by the pharmaceutical companies. And the people who are doing alternative medicine, they don't get published. And yet, what I have seen in my practice, that just basic things, changing the diets of people, educating people on alternative treatments, pulls them away from the pharmaceutical industry. And they want essentially patients dependent upon the pharmaceutical industry because that's their profit. And the issue is that as what we've seen since 1960 and the changes in our diet and the amount of poisons literally in our diet with dyes and the things that we put, on our plants as they're growing, what the farmers are exposing our, all the entire food supply is things that are killing us. And when we have patients who choose to do organic, who choose a different food supply, who choose to limit for personal reasons, religious reasons, the amount of vaccines they're exposed to, we witness these people reclaim their health. We witness autoimmune disease become stabilized without pharmacologic agents. This is what we want for the people. We want people who can live a healthy life by choosing healthy food, and so that they don't have to be dependent on pharmaceutical products in order to survive from one day to the next. And this can occur and is occurring all over the world because people are choosing an alternative and they're reclaiming their health. And this is what we want. We have a nation that is many people are completely dependent on pharmacologic agents to get from one day to the next. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we could cut the cost of healthcare by over half by just changing the diets of people and limiting the vaccines that they're exposed to? This is what we want for America.
One of the good things I think that's coming out of this also is, and I remember this because I was at the networks at the time when the pharma ads were put on television. I thought it was a really bad decision at the time. I think it's a horrendous decision. And coming out of COVID, now you have the Ron Johnsons of the world. And Ron told me in an interview before Christmas that he was going after taking the ads, pharma ads off of television. I said, that's not enough. You have to take them off the internet because that's the Wild West in the last 25 years. And so I think that having that discussion is important, because the first time the ads went on, they had to have all these disclaimers. So they can put up there that you can take X, Y, and Z, but even though you might have a stroke or you might die, you should consult with your doctor. I mean, it's insanity because it's a constant push for the pharma industry. So I think that is a good thing that's coming out. And I think that Bobby probably would agree with that. I don't know if he agrees with going, on the internet, but I think he should, because that's how these people have bombarded people with the mass marketing. And I've heard too many times, and Sheila, I don't know if you find this in your practice because you're a psychiatrist, but doctors have told me that when a client sees something on a drug being advertised on television, if they think that their drug isn't making them better, they many times will say to the doctor, well, let me try that one, doctor. I saw that on television. Do you find that in your practice?
Absolutely. And it's so powerful that I remember when my daughter was 3 years old and one of us complained of a stomach ache, and she said, well, that's for the purple pill. All right. So you've got that indoctrination that is occurring very early, and it's occurring when the patients come in. They believe 100% that the ad, whatever is said in the ad, will work for them. And I have to spend a lot of time explaining why that medication in particular is a very poor choice for them. And that's difficult because they're desperate and they want an instant fix. We've become a society that says, I want a pill, I want my pain and suffering to be over. Their pain and suffering didn't begin instantly. It's begun over time, and it takes time to reverse their symptoms. But it's much better to do it in a manner that provides health rather than chronic dependence.
Let's go back to when you started the medical freedom in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And it was as a result of COVID. What are your observations, Sheila, over time now when you've seen the evolution of this? I know I've participated in one of your conferences, but what is it that you see that is hopeful to you?
The hope is that patients are choosing alternatives. They are choosing alternative meds for treatment of disease, that they're being very aware of how they have to have an advocate with them when they're hospitalized. I get more and more consults on a regular basis of people with a family member that is hospitalized, and they want input about what the hospital is saying and how do they confront the hospital system. They are being empowered across the state to advocate for the patient. And this is something that I've never seen in the face of medicine. This is really critically important, that they're not just accepting the basic information that's being told to them. They're beginning to question what is being told them, and they're demanding answers and they're demanding treatment. I think that's a wonderful option. People are also asking on a regular basis to be weaned from all of their meds. They're looking at alternative treatments for high blood pressure. They're looking at alternative treatments for their diabetes. I'm also witnessing more and more people changing what they do in terms of the childhood vaccine schedule. They're looking at the side effects of the childhood vaccine schedules, which vaccines that they believe are necessary and those that they believe are not necessary. They're really doing investigations into this. And I've had the privilege of witnessing children, their growth and development, that have been unvaccinated. And it has been one of the greatest pleasures of my life to witness these children and the development, particularly their neurological development, that is, from my perspective, I've never seen healthier children in my life, particularly in terms of speech and language development and neurological control. These children are healthy, and for the medical establishment really needs to look at what's been witnessed by the communities that have never vaccinated their children and the health that those children give, versus what we've seen on the other end of this staggering rise of autism. And I want to say, as a child psychiatrist, this is not just better diagnostic procedures. There are more and more autistic children than I have ever seen in my 30-year career. And we cannot overlook that. These children are sick, And I have patients who are learning disabled, and their parents are able to clearly identify the link between when they lost developmental function and the link to when their vaccines occurred. That is tragic, and we need to support these families, and we need to offer them health.
So in May of 2021, there were a group of COVID vax injured who wrote a letter to Fauci, Collins, it was NIH, NIAID, CDC, FDA, and the Biden White House, telling them that they wanted to be acknowledged. They wanted their injuries to be acknowledged. And I kind of sit back and I think to myself, to date, the FDA, NIH, CDC, and NIAID has not officially recognized the vascular and the neurological injuries due to the COVID vaccinations. So what do you guys think that these senators on Capitol Hill are going to do? Wash this over and gaslight these injuries? Because the truth is, it's heinous in terms of the fact that this has not been acknowledged here in the United States, the link between the neurological injuries, the vascular injuries. We've only recognized the cardio injuries. But how do you think the senators are going to handle that? Because I think, to me, that is going to expose the senators on Capitol Hill if they don't recognize it.
I think it's really critical that it be recognized. I've never seen the degree of suffering that I've seen with that vaccine. I have young people who have had immediate reactions to the vaccine, have significant cardiovascular injury. I have people who have suffered congestive heart failure, strokes, the increase of autoimmune illness and cancer. We have to look at this. It has to be investigated. If we look at just the rise in cancer alone in the vaccinated population that received the COVID-19 shots, it's alarming. I have families that have lost 3 family members in COVID, and not from COVID. They died from other things than COVID. This is really disturbing. And we need to look at that. It needs to be thoroughly investigated. And we need to, I could think, have a moratorium on all COVID-19 shots.
So then that brings up, John, what we talked about the other day, Mr. Oracle talking about the mRNA cancer vaccination on the horizon. I would have thrown this guy into it. I would have drowned him in a tank of water. I mean, the fact that anybody is talking about, well, now we have turbo cancer because of the COVID shots, but now we should have a cancer vaccination to get rid of it. I mean, that's downstream.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit like, create the disease and then create the cure, right? Then the cure creates more disease. Maybe this platform of therapy really holds promise. I think a lot of people fell into it because they believed that. They fell for the marketing hype from their own, sponsors that said, this new mRNA platform will be able to print a vaccine and have it ready for you when you get off a flight. We have Fauci and Bright talking about that in 2019, Rick Bright. So maybe they fell for the PR a little bit, but at this point, the screams are getting a little too loud, a little louder than the cheers these days. So when I hear Larry Ellison say these things, first of all, the guy does not look 80. That's concerning. The second thing of all is, he's not a doctor. I mean, he can support it and do whatever he wants, but we better not have any mandates. And it does appear that the world's most brutal IQ test is going to continue.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens. The vote is February 4th, and I think that we should encourage everybody who thinks that they don't have a voice to get in touch with their senators, because every vote counts. And I think that people should understand this is a moment in time where we can hold people accountable if they vote against this, because the one thing we do know is that we don't want to have the same storm again. If you don't want the same storm, then you have to change the captains of the ship to turn it around.
That's exactly right. I think everyone needs to call their senators and even their delegates to call their senators and tell them how critical this is for the health of the nation.
Agreed. And it's not just vaccines. It's I think a lot of people, especially the enemies of Bobby Kennedy, I think they want to target him as specifically a vaccine guy, right? He's always said that he wants vaccine research to be robust and transparent, and he's never been anti-vaxxer. He just wants it to be safe. I mean, this should be a very common thinking process for all of us, but instead, it says more about the people targeting him than it does about him. Why don't they want transparency? Why don't they want better science?
Well, because they want to push the market. I mean, the same way when, and people have to realize that there's two stories about Bobby's history with Fauci. He met with Fauci after Trump was first elected. It was during the transition. He met with then President Trump in 2000, I guess it would have been 2017, late 2016. And Trump asked Bobby to head up the Commission for Vaccine Safety at that point in time. Then Bill Gates showed up and had a meeting with then President Trump and basically said that was a stupid ass idea. And so that it never happened. But what Bobby did get was a meeting with Fauci at the time. And Fauci said that they had safety trials for these childhood scheduled vaccinations. And he didn't have them with him, but he would send them to Bobby. And Bobby never received them. And then Bobby sued these people to get the safety trial documentation. And as a result of that lawsuit, it has been established that the safety trials do not exist for some of those vaccinations. So when Bobby talks about the safety trials, it's because we're injecting scheduled mandated vaccinations into children, into minors in America to go to school. And there's no safety trials in some of those. So what Bobby's talking about is something that should be expected. And we would think that we'd want our government bureaucrats to do the right thing because they're advertising that these are safe and effective. Well, we all know now that when they said that the COVID shots were safe and effective, we also know that they wanted to keep the injuries under lid. They never wanted to reveal them. We know that when people said, let us see the safety trials, that Pfizer, for an example, and the FDA said, no. They jointly, first Pfizer said, we want to keep those documentations under seal for 55 years. That's a red flag. But then FDA came in as a partner to keep it under seal with Pfizer for 75 years. The judge said, no, this is in the public interest. And they started dumping the documents into the public domain. After 1 month, they went back to court and said, oh, it's burdensome, Your Honor. We can't do this. And the judge said, thank God. Keep on dumping these documents. And as a result of those documents, we now know that when they said that they're safe and effective for everybody, that was a lie, because included in those documents that Pfizer didn't want the world to see for 75 years were the injuries of vascular and neurological and cardio, and it was multiple. So this wasn't like, you get a shot and you get blood clots and they know how to take care of blood clot. That's not what happened here. So the fact that they wanted to keep this under seal and there's no transparency, and Bobby Kennedy's coming in there like a wrecking ball and saying, we're going to have transparency, we're going to have safety. I know how the game is played. I've been in this game for years and years and years, as Bobby has. I can see why there would be pushback on Bobby, and you'd have these crazy groups of advertising that we have all, thousands of doctors that are signing up and saying we don't want Bobby and he's unfit. Let's just mark this out. Senator Markey is on the health committee. Senator Markey said on NPR weeks ago that Bobby was unfit. Then you had Congressman Auchincloss from Massachusetts, from Cambridge. Well, his daddy, his mother is the CEO of Dana-Farber. His daddy is the sidekick of Fauci for decades. So when Jake Auchincloss comes out and says that Bobby Kennedy's not fit, okay, well, you know what? He has a vested interest. Markey has a vested interest in Massachusetts because Harvard is there, and that is a pro-pharma city. That's my hometown. And then you have other people who are going to be Chris Murphy in Connecticut. Well, Connecticut's one of those states where the state legislators said there are no religious exemptions for children. So I think this is going to be fascinating to see how people play this game. Mikey Bloomberg, okay, he came out, he wrote a piece in his own news organization several weeks ago saying Bobby's unfit. Well, if Bobby's unfit because he tells the truth, what does that say about the people, as you said, John, that are criticizing him? It says actually more about them because they're not supporting somebody that just wants to get to the truth and basically have safety for children and for Americans.
It's fascinating. It's really, I think people are going to look back at this time in history and ask what in the hell happened.
Oh, money. There's no question in my mind. This is a corrupt financial mafia business like none other we've ever seen. And so many people believed in the medical divinity of the white coat.
And, you know, it's important that we have respect for doctors because, look, if you're a patient and let's say you've got a broken bone, if you don't trust a doctor, they're not going to be able to set it right because you're fighting and thrashing and making things worse. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there is a purpose for respect for medical doctors. But it seems like the majority of doctors, especially if they're under the age of 40, maybe that's a part of their education system that, you know, maybe the medical hospitals and training hospitals got a little too woke. I don't know, but it seems like the ones under 40 have been a little less adherent to informed consent.
Well, Sheila, let's talk about, you mentioned this to me months ago. When you were in medical school and doing your residency, there was a different name for calling a patient. And that was sort of, it became part of the vernacular in the medical school. Tell us about that.
So you were a patient and then you became a client, okay? I don't have clients. I have patients. There's a doctor-patient relationship, not a doctor-client relationship. And I think one of the things when you talk about the doctors under 40, and when I was in medical school, it was just the start of the hospitalist movement. And so what we saw is a shift between your primary care doctor going and doing hospital rounds in the morning and then coming back to his clinic in the afternoon. And when this shift occurred away from your lifelong family doctor treating you in the hospital when you were ill and knowing your entire history to a hospitalist who could rotate essentially every single day that you're in the hospital. And so there's no connection between that physician and you. There's no vested interest in you as a human being. It's how quickly can I treat you and get you out the door as mandated by the insurance company. So the guidelines for hospitalization are dictated by insurance companies. For you come in with an illness, and God forbid that you have two, you are dictated X number of days in order to have the patient out the door. And so the doctor's goal is to treat as rapidly as possible, focus on a key problem, not necessarily all of the problems that the patient is facing, and get them out the door and hope that they don't come back. And this is incentivized, all right? So you want patients out the door quickly. This type of medicine has been the detriment to the patient. It has been a moneymaker for hospitals. And further, when we had Obamacare come in, this is very key. We said that a part of Obamacare said that we will not prosecute doctors who do not participate in euthanasia or medical assistance in dying. So for the first time, the doctors are taught that medical assistance in dying should be the norm. This is criminal. This is a direct violation of the Hippocratic Oath. But this is the ethics that our young doctors are being taught. So there's no investment in the patient or the family. You are just a person who's occupying a bed. And if as soon as we get you out the door, that's what's best for the system. And this is totally unethical and is dangerous to every patient.
You know, there's going to be a lot of cleaning up because there's just too many people that have gone through this and too many people that were not able to advocate for their loved ones during COVID, that got gaslighted by the system after they were injured, and they continue to get gaslit. So it's gonna be interesting, I think, and it's going to be very telling for all of these senators and how they handle this hearing with Bobby.
Something I'm curious about. Let's aim down the road a little farther. What happens if Bobby gets confirmed? Where do we go from there?
Hang on. I think it's going to be fascinating.
I am so hopeful that I think we can begin with our food supply and reversing the food pyramid and getting that out of a mandatory guideline for the nation, particularly for our diabetics. It's the worst thing for diabetics in the nation. And we can begin to give people healthy food and healthy food advice that is based in real science, not the propaganda of the food pyramid. So it starts at a very basic level. But I think the biggest thing is medical freedom. If we can have freedom of choice in medicine, and we can understand and advocate for what we want in terms of our healthcare decisions, that is what needs to happen.
Well, Sheila, you can report back to us from Washington about this, because I think it's going to be very interesting. And again, the hearings are this coming week. The vote won't be until February 4th, and I'm certain that there are going to be, more people out there trying to smash Bobby and smash everybody else that is supporting, this hopeful change with HHS, because we really need to have somebody that understands the system, as opposed to people who have run HHS in the past who just wanted to protect the status quo. And I think it's, in some ways, I think, having Biden give Fauci a preemptive pardon, that only put more spotlight on this.
Yep, that definitely did not make things easier for him.
No, it didn't. It didn't. Yeah. So we'll wait and see. Sheila, thank you for joining us. Okay.
Glad to do it.
Yeah, and please keep in touch when you're in Washington, because I want. It's always the chit chatter behind the scenes that always makes a difference in the good stories.
Yes, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.